Oils had been extremely prosperous lately. No mention whatever of these fees was made to their guests, no offertory plate was put in a prominent position in the hall, there was no fumbling for change or the discreet pressure of coins into the secretary's hand. The entire cost was borne by Romanian Oils. The Princess and Mrs Quantock apparently were old friends. They spoke to each other at dinner as dear friend, and the Princess declared in the most gratifying way that they had been most intimate in a previous incarnation, without any allusion to the fact that in this incarnation they had met for the first time last week at a vegetarian restaurant. She was kind enough, it was left to be understood, to give a little séance after dinner at the house of her dear friend, and so publicly the question of money never came up. Now the Princess was to stay 3 nights, and therefore as soon as Mrs Quantock had made sure of that, she proceeded to fill up each of the séances without asking Lucia to any of them. It was not that she had not fully forgiven her for her odious grabbing of the Guru, for she had done that on the night of the Spanish quartet. It was rather that she meant to make sure that there would by no possibility be anything to forgive concerning her contact with regard to the Princess. Lucia could not grab her, and so called Daisy's powers of forgiveness into play again if she never came near her, and Daisy meant to take proper precautions that she should not come near her. Accordingly Georgie and Piggy were asked to the first séance. If it did not go very well, it would not particularly matter with them. Olga and Mr Shuttleworth were bidden to the second, and Lady Ambermere with Georgie again to the third. This, quite apart from the immense interest of psychic phenomena, was deadly work, for it would be bitter indeed to Lucia to know, as she most undoubtedly would, that Lady Ambermere, who had cut her so firmly, was dining twice and coming to a séance. Daisy, it must again be repeated, had quite forgiven Lucia about the Guru, but Lucia must take the consequences of what she had done. It was after the first séance that the frenzy for spiritualism seized Riseholme. The Princess, with great good nature, gave some further exhibitions of her psychical power in addition to the séances, and even as Georgie the next afternoon was receiving Lucia's cruel verdict about Debussy, the Sibyl was looking at the hands of Colonel Boucher and Mrs Weston, and unerringly probing into their past, and lifting the corner of the veil, giving them both glimpses into the future. She knew that the two were engaged, for that she had learned from Mrs Quantock in her morning's drive, and did not attempt to conceal the fact. But how could it be accounted for that, looking impressively from the one to the other, she said that a woman no longer young but tall and with fair hair had crossed their lives and had been connected with one of them for years past? It was impossible to describe Elizabeth more accurately than that, and Mrs Weston in high excitement confessed that her maid, who had been with her for 15 years, entirely corresponded with what the Princess had seen in her hand. After that it took only a moment's further scrutiny for the Princess to discover that Elizabeth was going to be happy too. Then she found that there was a man connected with Elizabeth, and Colonel Boucher's hand, to which she transferred her gaze, trembled with delightful anticipation. She seemed to see a man there, she was not quite sure, but was there a man who perhaps had been known to him for a long time? There was. And then by degrees the affairs of Elizabeth and Atkinson were unerringly unravelled. It was a little wonder that the Colonel pushed Mrs Weston's bath chair with record speed to Ye Sign of Ye Daffodil, and by the greatest good luck obtained a copy of the Palmist's Manual. At another of these informal séances attended by Goosie and Mrs Antrobus, even stranger things had happened, for the Princess's hands, as they held a little preliminary conversation, began to tremble and twitch even more strongly than Colonel Boucher's, and Mrs Quantock hastily supplied her with a pencil and a quantity of sheets of foolscap paper, for this trembling and twitching implied that Reskia, an ancient Egyptian priestess, was longing to use the Princess's hand for automatic writing. After a few wild scrawls and plunges with the pencil, the princess, though she still continued to talk to them, covered sheet after sheet in large flowing handwriting. This, when it was finished and the princess sunk back in her chair, proved to be the most wonderful spiritual discourse, describing the happiness and harmony which pervaded the whole universe, and was only temporarily obscured by the mists of materiality. These mists were wholly withdrawn from the vision of those who had passed over. They lived in the midst of song and flowers and light and love. Towards the end there was a less intelligible passage about fire from the clouds. It was rendered completely intelligible the very next day, when there was a thunderstorm, surely an unusual occurrence in November. If that had not happened, Mrs. Quantock's interpretation of it as referring to zeppelins would have been found equally satisfactory. It was no wonder, after that Mrs. Antrobus, Piggy and Goosey spent long evenings with pencils and paper, for the princess said that everybody had the gift of automatic writing if they would only take pains and patience to develop it. Everybody had his own particular guide, and it was the very next day that Piggy obtained a script clearly signed Annabel Nicostratus, and Jamifleg followed very soon after for her mother and sister, and so there was no jealousy. But the crown and apex of these manifestations was undoubtedly the 3 regular séances which took place to the 3 select circles after dinner. Musical boxes resounded, violins gave forth ravishing airs, the sitters were touched by unseen fingers when everybody's hands were touching all around the table, and from the middle of it materializations swathed in muslin were built up. Pocky came, visible to the eye, and played spirit music. Amadeo, melancholy impressive, recited Dante, and Cardinal Newman, not visible to the eye but audible to the ear, joined in the singing "Lead, Kindly Light," which the secretary requested them to encourage him with, and blessed them profusely at the conclusion. Lady Ambermere was so much impressed and so nervous of driving home alone that she insisted on George's going back to the hall with her, and consigning her person to Pug and Miss Lyall, and for the 3 days of the princess's visit there was practically no subject discussed at the parliaments on the green except the latest manifestations. Olga went to town for a crystal, and Georgie for a planchette, and Riseholme temporarily became a spiritualistic republic, with the princess as priestess and Mrs. Quantock as president. Lucia all this time was almost insane with pique and jealousy, for she sat in vain waiting for an invitation to come to a séance, and would, long before the 3 days were over, have welcomed with enthusiasm a place at one of the inferior and informal exhibitions. Since she could not procure the princess for dinner, she asked Daisy to bring her to lunch or tea, or at any hour, day or night, which was convenient. She made Peppino hang about opposite Daisy's house with orders to drop his stick or let his hat blow off if he saw even the secretary coming out of the gate, so as possibly to enter into conversation with them, while she positively forced herself one morning into Daisy's hall and cried "Margherita" in silvery tones. On this occasion Margherita came out of the drawing room with a most determined expression on her face, and shut the door carefully behind her. "Dearest Lucia," she said, "how nice to see you. What is it?" "I just popped in for a chat," said she. "I haven't set eyes on you since the evening of the Spanish quartet." "No, so long ago as that, is it? Well, you must come in again sometime, very soon, won't you? The day after tomorrow I shall be much less busy. Promise to look in then." "You have a visitor with you, have you not?" asked Lucia desperately. "Yes, 2 indeed, dear friends of mine, but I'm afraid you would not like them. I know your opinion about anything connected with spiritualism, and, isn't it silly of us, we've been dabbling in that." "Oh, but how interesting," said Lucia. I am always ready to learn, and alter my opinions if I'm wrong." Mrs. Quantock did not move from in front of the drawing-room door. "Yes," she said, "then we will have a great talk about it when you come to see me the day after tomorrow. But I know I shall find you hard to convince." She kissed the tips of her fingers in a manner so hopelessly final that there was nothing to do but go away.